When you think of wild animals, your mind may go to the many charismatic megafauna of Africa or Asia. Giraffes, elephants, big cats, or maybe even the unique marsupials of Australia. Today's episode will be all about celebrating the amazing wildlife that you may find in your own backyard, with the animals of North America at the Northeast Wisconsin Zoo. A facility that I'm guessing most of my viewers are not familiar with. The new zoo and its adjoining adventure park occupy a combined 43 acres, with a majority of the zoo split into 3 sections dedicated to mostly North American species. We'll meet native animals along the Wisconsin trails, see the star resident of the short northern trails, and finish up our tour with the iconic species of the North American plains. Continuing a theme I started in my Arizona trail tour, we'll learn some of the roles these animals play in Native American symbolism and mythology. With that said, let's begin. The portal to North America is placed roughly in the middle of the zoo, when you reach a fork in the path. To the right lies the Great Plains of the American West, but we'll be beginning to the left with the Wisconsin trails. The first habitat is a modest, open-air yard with fairly low walls and a large pool placed in the middle, an ideal setting for the North American river otter. While there's no underwater viewing here, it is nice to get an unobstructed view of these large mustelids, who are often confined behind glass. This also perfectly replicates how you might observe otters in the wild. Indigenous people may view the otter as a sign of good luck due to its value as food or for fur. Legend says that otter long ago decided life was too short to take everything serious, which is why otters are so playful, seemingly turning tasks like hunting into games. For any otter lovers out there, the new zoo might be the place for you, since the zoo does offer otter feeding several days throughout the week. The zoo's current otter pair are Louie and Minnie, who are on breeding loan from the Chahinkapa Zoo in North Dakota, and it seems that they're trying their best to fulfill that duty, since they decided to get a little intimate while I was filming. The new zoo has had success breeding otters in the past, with litters born in 2016 and 2019. Across from the otters is one of the zoo's largest yards, which acts as the centerpiece of the Wisconsin trails. But we'll see it again from the other side, so moving further up the hill is the humble abode of Aldo the American black bear. Aldo was rescued as a cub in Oregon and actually spent a brief time living in a local zookeeper's kitchen before making the move to Wisconsin. Although Aldo isn't from Wisconsin, black bears are a common sight here with a statewide population of over 20,000. In Native American myths, bears often play the role of guardians, teachers, leaders, or healers, and later I'll share the Lakota legend of the badger and the bear. Moving along for now, this smaller habitat on the right held red foxes on my 2021 visit, but they were since replaced with a pair of Cape porcupines, who of course weren't on exhibit for the year yet on this brisk early April day. Continuing up the trail, from an overlook on the left, you can see into a large, forested yard for a very rare canine, the red wolf. The red wolf's lineage is somewhat of a mystery, with some studies indicating that they are genetically closer to coyotes than other wolves, and at times it was even believed that they may be coyote-wolf hybrids. The current consensus is that they represent some sort of intermediary between wolves and coyotes, and just how rare are they? Well, there's a few hundred red wolves remaining, but most of them are in zoos or other captive facilities. A recent population estimate states that there could be as few as 20 red wolves truly living in the wild. Moving over to the right, a second overlook looks into an exhibit that once held mountain lions, but is now home to a smaller feline we're very familiar with, the Canada lynx. Since we've talked about them before, I'll keep this short, sharing that in Native American traditions, the lynx is sometimes known as the keeper of secrets. It is also revered for its hunting prowess, and in some northeastern tribes may appear as a villain symbolizing greed or violence. Continuing on, after a short walk downhill, you reach two conspicuous round viewing shelters off to the side of the main trail. The shelter on the left features the beautiful snowy owl. Owls may not be the first bird that comes to mind when you think of fast flyers, but the snowy owl can reach speeds of 40 to 50 miles per hour. Even more surprising, the snowy owl is not strictly nocturnal like most owls are typically considered to be. Instead, they may be active both in daylight or at night, depending on factors including the amount of sunlight and the activity of their prey. The second shelter contains the helmeted guinea fowl, who are of course not native to Wisconsin, but as I mentioned in my last episode, are becoming popular for people to keep at their homes, which could help explain their inclusion here. Back on the main trail, there's two side-by-side habitats for similar-sized felines. The first holds bobcats, although good luck since I've yet to see one here, but the zoo does recommend checking in the trees if you don't see them at first. The other exhibit next door, meanwhile, holds more Canada lynx. We've now circled around to the other side of that large yard I teased earlier. From another viewing deck, we can see that it's home to a species my Midwestern friends will be all too familiar with, the white-tailed deer. A common sight all over the US, but not exactly the most common zoo animal. So why are white-tailed deer so abundant? Well, because of us. When Western colonizers arrived in North America, the deer population originally declined, like many large animals, and there was concerns about the species' long-term survival. But due to several factors, including the extirpation of their natural predators from many areas, the white-tailed deer was eventually able to flourish into the high populations we see today. Living alongside the deer are sandhill cranes. The sandhill crane is an ancient bird with some fossils that have been discovered being dated to be over 2.5 million years old. These incredible migrators can fly over 200 miles in a single day, and at times during migration, over 75% of the total sandhill crane population may be found along one stretch of the Platte River in Nebraska. Next up, there's two side-by-side exhibits for another familiar species on our tours. For the first time in 10 episodes, it's the red panda, who of course are a little out of place here since they are native to the temperate forest of China, India, Nepal, and Myanmar. As much as 98% of a red panda's diet consists of bamboo, but despite sharing this common food source with giant pandas, the red panda's closest relative is actually the raccoon that roams our local North American woods. Red pandas are also unique for their pseudo-thumbs, an enlarged, modified wrist bone that helps them grasp branches. Past the red pandas, the trail branches off under an antler-adorned archway that invites guests to explore the wonders of the northern trails. After a short, winding walk through the woods, you'll arrive at the Riley Building, and no, I don't know why it's called that. You can't actually enter the building, but instead viewable from outside are many smaller glass-fronted habitats that cover all sides of the building. Residing inside them is an interesting assortment of creatures, including bullfrogs, soft-shelled turtles, the endangered black-footed ferret, black-necked stilts, the cotton-top tamarin, making their first appearance since my very first exhibit tour, go against the northern theme as a native of the South American tropics. The cotton-top tamarin is critically endangered and can only be found along a small portion of the Colombian coast. They are named for the tufts of white hair on top of their heads, which has also given them the amusing nickname of Little Einsteins. Finally, the ones I spent the most time watching, the burrowing owl. During times of plentiful food, burrowing owls will create large stores of food to depend on during times of egg incubation or when food is more scarce, with one such store being found containing over 200 rodents. Another fascinating method the burrowing owl has for acquiring food is to line the entrance of their burrow with animal dung, attracting insects for easy pickings. They've also been known to adorn their burrow entrances with an assortment of man-made objects like bottle caps or bits of paper. The indigenous Hopi tribe gave the burrowing owl the name Watcher of the Dark, believing it to be connected to their god of the dead as a guardian and protector of all things underground. Surrounding the Riley Building are two large woodland yards, possibly the best exhibits in the entire zoo. Currently, this space is all reserved for one of the zoo stars. Murphy the Alaskan Moose. Murphy arrived from the Alaska Zoo in late 2021, where he was raised after being orphaned. At present, Murphy is the only moose at the zoo after the passing of their older female Matilda earlier this year. Despite them being North American natives, finding a zoo that displays moose isn't exactly easy. As of 2019, moose could only be found at 6 AZA zoos, and that number may be even lower now. As you can see, Murphy is able to walk under the guest boardwalk, so if you don't see him at first, try waiting a few minutes to see if he reappears. The moose is the largest member of the deer family, with adult bulls weighing over 1,300 pounds, with antlers that can span 6 feet from tip to tip. For such a large animal, the moose actually has a fairly short lifespan, typically living only 8 to 12 years, although some can live into their 20s, and some sources do claim the average lifespan to be longer. In addition to antlers, bull moose have a dangle of skin on their chin called a dewlap, the size of which may help determine their dominance level. Moose are adept swimmers, able to swim for several miles, and they will even fully submerge themselves to feed on aquatic plants. The name moose originates from the Algonquin words mus or moose, which mean eater of twigs or one who strips off the bark, as moose are known to do. Next to the moose is a much smaller yard for whooping cranes. Unlike the more common sandhill crane, the whooping crane is endangered. They spend the summers in northwest Canada and Wisconsin before traveling down to Texas and the American Southeast for the winter. This is North America's tallest bird, named for their distinctive loud calls. Backtracking under the Northern Trails Arch, straight ahead is a more old-fashioned, small moated exhibit for Penelope the North American porcupine, North America's second largest rodent. An Ojibwe legend tells how the porcupine got its quills. One day, while attempting to escape a hungry bear, Porcupine hid under a hawthorn tree, and after noticing how the thorns pricked him, decided to pile them on his back. When the bear came along, it jumped on the porcupine, but the thorns pricked it painfully, so it ran off. An Ojibwe trickster called Nanabuso saw this happen and decided to help the porcupine. He used his magic to make the thorns part of the porcupine's skin, and from that day on, all the predators were afraid of the porcupine's quills. One of the final exhibits along the Wisconsin trails is the North American Walk-Through Aviary. Once you're through the double doors, look for Sierra, a 24-year-old rescued bald eagle who has lived at the new zoo since 2000. In the warmer months, the aviary also houses the American white pelican. The remainder of the residents are smaller waterfowl, including wood ducks, green-winged teals, ruddy ducks, and more. Signs posted around the aviary discuss the differences between dabbling and diving ducks. Wisconsin is home to around 25 species of ducks, including 9 species of dabbling ducks and 7 kinds of diving ducks. Leaving the aviary, the final exhibit contained within the Wisconsin trails is another smaller, moated habitat for Zook the raccoon, who I didn't see on my visit last spring, but I did get some great photos of him in 2021. We've now completed our loop of the Wisconsin trails and are back to where we started. Taking the other path toward the North American plains, there's a small habitat for a seldom seen zoo animal, the American badger. The exhibit includes a pop-up bubble that allows kids and adults small enough like myself to get a unique view from inside the exhibit. Normally, there would be little expectation of actually seeing this famously nocturnal animal awake at a zoo, but not here. That's because Bucky here was raised by humans and is therefore much more active during the day than most badgers. His exhibit mate, Helen, is a little more familiar with the fact that she's supposed to be a nocturnal animal, but I was able to see her being lured out for mealtime. One of Wisconsin's nicknames is the Badger State, and the badger is the mascot of the University of Wisconsin, so it's only appropriate for a Wisconsin zoo to display them. So about that Lakota legend, the story of the badger and the bear begins with a prosperous, well-fed badger family, thanks to Father Badger's great hunting skills. One day, a starving black bear came calling on the badgers after being drawn there by the smell of their drying meat. The badger selflessly gave the bear all he could eat. The bear became a regular visitor, relying on the badger's unwavering hospitality. But one day when the bear returned, something was different. The bear had grown strong, and he selfishly chased the very badgers who had helped him out of their home and took all their belongings. Without his tools, the father badger could not provide food for his family, and after a time of hardship, he prayed to the Great Spirit and appeared a Lakota Avenger, who traveled with the badger to reclaim his home. Connected to the badgers is a similar but more elevated exhibit that also comes with a pop-up bubble. This one holds the black-tailed prairie dog, who I've already featured a few times this year. Here, they were showing that even the cutest animals can be a little passive-aggressive sometimes, as these two mischievously push dirt towards each other. In addition to providing some comedy, prairie dogs are reportedly very tough little critters who will not hesitate to fight back when threatened. Recent studies have shown that prairie dogs have extremely intricate communication and are able to relay detailed descriptions of approaching danger. Although the black-tailed prairie dog is listed as least concern, there is 2 species of prairie dogs that are endangered, and prairie dogs as a whole have lost 95% of their original range to human encroachment. Here's a quick teaser of North America's final habitat, but first, ascending an elevated boardwalk, on the right side is a small pond for trumpeter swans. And now, today's grand finale. The North American Great Plains. The Great Plains once shook with the stampeding hooves of millions of American bison, but this all changed with the westward expansion of European colonizers, who, driven by the value of bison products and a desire to screw over the natives who depended on the bison, slaughtered the bison in inconceivable numbers. Until 1886, when taxidermist William Hornaday traveled west to collect bison specimens, and was stunned that he could not find a living bison. Inspired by his experience, Hornaday shifted his focus toward trying to save the bison from extinction. At this time, there may have been fewer than 1,000 bison remaining, but through the work of zoos, conservationists, and indigenous tribes, the bison started to recover. By 2000, the American bison population reached 500,000. Although these numbers don't come close to their historic size, the species has successfully been brought back from the brink of extinction. Green Bay's bison are Petunia and Clover, who share their large exhibit with Todd and Hummus, the North American elk. The moose may claim the record as the world's largest deer, but the elk holds the title for the loudest. Their loud bellows, known as bugling, may be used as a territorial warning or a mating call. As Todd was showing off, elk, like moose, are very at home in the water, and adult elk are able to swim several miles at a time. Although not to the same extent as the bison, elk populations also felt the effects of European colonization, dropping from tens of millions to around 100,000 in the early 1900s. But they have also recovered with around 1 million elk in North America today. Finally, although I'm not sure if the new zoo still has pronghorn, I couldn't possibly end the tour without mentioning Thistle, who was one of the highlights of my 2021 visit, as I watched him run a good length of the habitat before donning a hat made out of leaves and coming to a stop right in front of me, where he stamped his feet, seemingly indignant that I would have the audacity to film him. Sadly, Thistle passed away in late 2022. If you're still with me after all that, I'll keep this outro short, sharing that what we just saw was not only one of the most extensive North American collections I've ever seen in a zoo, but also around 60% of the entire Northeast Wisconsin Zoo. For today's question, I want you to share your favorite conservation success story in the comments.